There is a planet about 23 light-years from Earth, and instead of a bright sun like ours, it orbits a much smaller and dimmer star, a red dwarf. And this red dwarf is not alone. It's part of a stellar system called Gliese 667. What if humans weren't the only ones keeping an eye on it? What if somebody else was already there? That's what today's build is about. An alien research robot on the super-Earth called Gliese 667cc. The robot is fictional, but the planet is real. Welcome to the Geeky Workbench. While I built the research robot from this fun little tank by Meng models, I can talk a bit about the significance of the star being a red dwarf. With only 31% of the Sun's mass, it's small, and with only about 1.4% of its luminosity, it doesn't radiate as much light towards its orbiting planet Gliese 667cc, which makes it darker and cooler, but still potentially habitable for humans and other species. And that's a great moment to add the fiction part of this sci-fi build. There is another species in a different stellar system that is also looking for life on other planets. This one has even sent a research robot to this exoplanet. This little tank is from a game called World War Toons, and I thought it looked too cute not to get it. So I'm transforming this into a research robot. After the upper and lower hulls were assembled, I prepared the turret too. To make this look less like an operated war vehicle and more like a research robot, I took some parts off again and added other greeblies instead. First, the tank cannon had to go, but we'll come back to that one later. Then the robot needed a wide-range antenna, which I made from an old earplug. I used a combination of CA glue and baking soda to glue the pieces and also fill the gaps. Does this part look familiar to you? Tell me in the comments if you have an idea where it's from. This part of a 1/72nd scale helicopter looked like a good frame for the sample box. I'll come back to it again later. Let me quickly show you what I had planned. My original idea was to make a little module that had landed on the surface by itself and the rover outside collecting samples. So I got one of the whey protein containers I had collected and searched the big parts box for big parts. And this little tape box is from way back in the 80s when we lived in Saudi Arabia for a while. I will find a use for them someday. But after I had built the module, I realized I wanted something more stationary and also smaller. So I cut the module in half and turned it around. With the basic shape done, yes, the top is a broken lid of a shaker bottle, it was time to get started on the terrain base. I created a small bit of elevation for the module and a relatively flat terrain for the plants using scraps of XPS foam. Now the robot needed a way into the research module, so I cut an opening and kept the piece, because that would make a sliding door for the module. Then I got out the mainly rectangular shaped parts box and looked for greeblies for the module. I only found an ink cartridge and a printer part. So I gathered some more greeblies from other boxes. I started gluing greeblies to the door and module with CA glue, but even though I had sanded everything, it came off shortly after filming. Off camera, I then gave the whole container a flame treatment. I saw Boiler Hobby Time do this to plastic pieces that wouldn't stick, so I tried it and it really does help. Then it was time to work on the terrain base. I had a different technique in mind, but then switched because I had too much and too thick a paste. The newspaper pieces were glued onto the base to cover the foam, and I really liked how this turned out. Instead of the tank cannon, the robot needed something to collect the samples, so I used styrene tubes in different sizes to make a telescope arm. And with thin wire and some greeblies, I made the gripper attachment for it. Next, the research module needed a greebly level up, so I added styrene panels and lots of things that looked like power generators and converters. Because not only the robot needed to recharge from time to time, but the module needed power for the equipment inside and also for transmitting data via the antennas on the roof. For the antennas I used the flip lid of the shaker and a part from an old camera. Inside the module there was just enough room for the robot and the collected plant samples. For those it had a simple shelf system with UV light, so the plants would have the same light conditions as outside. Speaking of plants, while I make various plants using laser cut paper, I can tell you where the idea for this diorama came from. I was inspired by an article in the Space magazine about exoplanets. Exoplanets are planets outside of our solar system. The article described how Gliese 667cc is affected by its surrounding stars. Two stars only emit as much light as our full moon does, and the Red Dwarf I mentioned earlier only about 1.4% of our Sun. This means there's barely any visible light, but more UV light, and the plants would have to adapt to that. They probably would not be green like on Earth, but violet, dark red or even black, because black absorbs the most amount of light, which is important when there hardly is any light to begin with. I really like the idea of black and violet plants and days of eerie twilight. Yeah, and that's how this build was born. There were more articles about exoplanets, and I might do another build about one of those. Let me know if you like these little bits of science behind the projects and if I should include that into another build. After the laser cut plants were done, I cut off a few funky resin-printed cacti from a set. And then I went on to prepare some plants from real ones I got from Diorama Presepe. I'll add his link in the description in case you want to have a look at the greenery he makes. Then I attached all my plants to thin strips of foam for painting and primed them black. In the meantime, I had also primed the models and the base. Instead of my usual DIY terrain paste, I used sawdust and glue. I left some patches free to imply a rocky texture beneath. Somehow I forgot to film the painting of the terrain. I'm sorry. I used watered down dark red and dark brown paint and dripped it onto the base with a pipette. And the robot now had its sample box at the back, and I added another sample to the gripper. After I had given the primed plants a coat of gloss varnish, I used some metallic color shift paints to paint them. I thought this would give them a cool, otherworldly look. I especially love the cobalt blue here. Next I made some plant containers for the shelves from styrene and filled them with foam board and sawdust and watered down glue. After I had primed and painted them, it was time to add some plants too. And even the robot can be a bit messy, so I sprinkled some dirt here and there. The samples inside the module needed lights, so I made some using styrene profiles and some leftover resin pieces. And this is the painted terrain base. With a sponge and some warm grey I dabbed on some rocky texture. But I'll be adding some more highlights to that later. Then it was time to add all the plants to the terrain. To make the scene more active, I dug 2 holes in the ground from which the robot has just taken samples. And because it's been there a while, and I want to hide some glue, I added some turf to the module roof as well. I noticed the inside of the module was too dark, so I decided to repurpose this clip-on reading lamp as a ceiling light. I took it apart, cut a piece off and soldered new wires to the circuit board. With a bit of paint, I dimmed the brightness of the LEDs a bit. And for the battery pack, I created a little styrene box that I could access easily. And then came the part I was a bit anxious about. I wanted to paint the models and base as they would look in the twilight of that planet. For the module I used a very light coat of dark purple because before I had used too much and too light a purple for the robot. To try and fix that I went over it with a thinned down black coat. And then using various shades of the purple I dry brushed on some highlights. And normally you would pick one light source and angle and focus your zenithal and highlights there. But this planet has 3 stars, so it has multiple light sources and a lot of shadows too. That's why I left the final painting for last. While I do the last finishing touches, let me thank you for making this journey to Gliese 667cc with me. Do you think we'll find life there someday? I hope so. Until then, thanks for hanging out at the Geeky Workbench. See you again soon.